Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Gambling Did You Know session. So today we're going to be talking about the dangers of online gambling. And I will say we're talking about potential dangers. So just because we're talking about some things, how this can be dangerous, this can be something that can be difficult for someone to get into, but there are people who will gamble online and there won't be any problem. So potential dangers of online gambling, why this is a little bit maybe different from other types of gambling, in-person casino gambling or things like that. We're going to cover all of this today. So starting with what online gambling actually is and kind of when it started, a little bit of background here. So basically, this is, internet gambling. It's also called e-gambling. It's kind of a general term used for any type of gambling over the internet. Again, there's many different types of this. We'll talk about some of those examples today. But again, you can be doing things like casino gambling online, sports betting, other options as well. And usually when we're talking about online gambling, we're going to be talking about, using credit cards to gamble. So we'll get into that a little bit again, but that is something that can definitely be dangerous too. So again, when did internet gambling or gambling online actually start? It's kind of said to be back in 1994. So while the internet is still relatively young, people were starting to find a way to gamble using the internet. So after a few years of this, say in the late 1990s, online gambling, really started to pick up a little bit. It started to get a little bit more popular. And actually the number of websites devoted to internet gambling just increased from about 15 in 1996 to over 200 in 1997. So, just 1 year made a drastic difference in that sense. And anytime you see that where there's kind of an explosion of, access or popularity there, following that is probably going to be more and more people developing gambling problems. So if we look at online gambling in Michigan, online betting was launched in January of 2021. So still just last year. Following this, again, there was a large increase in the number of calls to Michigan's problem gambling helpline. So again, these were people who maybe got into gambling in general with online betting, or they had been going to casinos, they had been gambling in different ways. They decided to try out online gambling or internet gambling, and they started to develop problems. So that is something we're going to look at on this next screen. This graph is not the most up to date. We only have through March of 2021 data here, but it's still something I think that you can see some of the drastic difference here. So these are just the number of calls to the Michigan Problem Gambling Helpline. And you can see, again, this was legalized and put into place in Michigan in January of 2021. So just right here, you can see from December 2020, we're kind of level out. And then there's a very sharp increase, multiplied amounts of people actually calling this number because they are developing gambling problems. So we do need to kind of look at more data here. We do need to get some more recent data, but this is the most recent data that I had at the time here. So something else to keep in mind, some other statistics here. So the Michigan Gaming Control Board, basically they announced that they had actually collected almost $43 million in gross receipts. So that's basically the bets that people were placing in the first day or 10 days that Michiganders were able to place bets online. So in just 10 days, we're basically averaging over $4 million a day in betting. So obviously that is a very large amount. There was a lot of gambling going on at this time. And that probably has just kind of increased or stayed steady at least throughout the past year or so. In that next month after this, again, we did see a spike in that gambling helpline, those gambling helpline calls. So there were 563 addiction calls placed in February, which is more than twice the number of the calls just back in 2 months prior, December of 2020. This is just kind of taken off from there. So again, operators collected almost $260 million in those receipts just from January through March. So again, a huge amount of people were either betting on this, or a large amount of people were betting a very significant amount of money here. So that is just to say, again, that online gambling is going to bring in a lot of money. It's something that, we've seen time and time again in the places that have legalized it and put it into place. We're going to kind of continue to see a lot of people spending a lot of money online when it comes to gambling. So you can see here, again, this is just for Michigan. So in the first 5 months of 2022, online casinos actually generated about 57% of their total 2021 revenue. So basically what that means is that if that continues for the rest of 2022, again, we don't have currently up to date through today the data, but if that continued for the rest of 2022, we would see that 2022 people were betting about 37% more than in 2021. So a very significant increase there. If this is to continue year after year, we're looking at, a huge amount of money being spent here just in Michigan when it comes to online gambling. So again, there are different types of online gambling. There are, basically you could say thousands. There's poker, there's bingo, lotteries, sports betting. Again, you can gamble in online casinos, horse racing, any type of bet basically that you can place in person. There's a way to find that kind of bet online nowadays. And probably that's even growing even more now. So why do people actually gamble online, maybe as opposed to gambling in person? So that's another good question that I think when we're talking about those dangers, what makes these two different? What makes gambling in person and gambling online different? So really the big one, or in my mind, one of the biggest ones, is the ability to basically gamble anywhere. So you can gamble, again, in your own home. You can gamble, or people could gamble at work. People could gamble, when they're taking the bus or something to work, something like that. So basically anywhere a person is, they nowadays could be gambling at that time. We've also seen that there are tutorials for new players sometimes. So this can actually help introduce people to gambling. Maybe they were too intimidated to go to a table game or something like that in a real casino. So now they're kind of learning those games a little bit before they do that. We'll touch on this one a little bit later as well. Sometimes there's also games that, can't be played at a casino, or, you like this game that's not at the casino that you go to. That could be the case too, and you can probably find that game online. Again, it's going to provide a person an opportunity, at least a theoretical opportunity, to win money when it comes to just being anywhere at their own home. We've also seen that there is generally an accelerated speed of play. So usually when you're gambling online, you can continue to play faster than a person who would be in a casino. And this one is something that we've seen, especially among people who are underage. So people can lie about their age, unfortunately, fairly easily, and get into these sites, potentially being able to gamble online when they would not be able to in person because of their age. So that all kind of points to this direction. This is, what we want to talk about today. The main point of today's session is, why is online gambling dangerous? Or again, why can this be dangerous? It's not necessarily dangerous for every single person, but what changes it? What can make this more difficult and dangerous in general? So first off, online gambling, and this is something that I need to stress very fully here. Online gambling can be highly addictive. So there is no limitation on availability. Again, if you have a phone, if you have a computer, that means that a person could get into these sites. A person could be gambling pretty much anywhere across the world. And that's something that is a challenge for a lot of people. It can be hard for a person to, put down their phone or put down their computer, especially if, they struggle with going to a casino and spending too much money. It's going to be a lot harder to put that down when it's just in your hand and you can do it just throughout your day without traveling anywhere. There's also no limitation on time. So same kind of idea here. You can be playing at home for hours and hours. You can stay up in the middle of the night. You can wake up early, any kind of thing. If you have a phone, a person could be using that all day to continue gambling. And there is even a lower limitation when it comes to money. So when a person can use their credit card and gamble, they can potentially be spending a lot more money than they would be spending if they only had to use cash or something like that. So, unfortunately, again, we can see people racking up debts a lot quicker when it comes to online gambling as opposed to in-person gambling. So I also want to come back a little bit to that free play and tutorial type point that I had made earlier. So I want to stress that, it's not so much of free play. And there's, two different points here that I'd like to make. So first off, we've actually seen that some online casinos will offer kind of actually free versions of their games. So the idea here is that we're going to be dealing with pretend money. A person's not going to be gaining money from this, but they're potentially going to be hooked on this. Because what we've seen a lot of times with this is in that free version, the player is actually going to have better odds than they would in that paid version or the real version of the game. So we've talked about how casinos can affect those odds. So they actually might be doing this in order to trick people into thinking that they can actually be making money. Because if I'm playing a free game and I'm winning tons of money in the game, even though it's not actually real money again, I may decide to actually put some real money down, and then I think I'll have that same chance when that's not actually true. And with that, kind of a different point, but again, related to the idea of free play, a person may be given, free credits or a certain matching amount of money when it comes to starting out gambling on this site or joining this site. And really, what I would like to stress is that this is calculated. So this is something that the casinos do because they expect to get more money back. They're not a charity. They're not giving you this money, so that you can make money. They're giving you this money so that you can get hooked on this. You can get interested in gambling because they know in the long run, they are going to be taking more of your money the longer you stay and play. So that's kind of the whole idea of free play, I think, is a misconception, I would say. And then a couple of additional risks, things that we've sort of talked about, but things to keep in mind as well here. So we have seen that people who come into gambling treatment, who had used the internet, again, as opposed to in-person or brick and mortar, casinos, they generally have more severe problems. With that, you also might see that, the sites might not be legitimate just because, there's this website that looks like it is maybe paying out people. That doesn't mean that they're actually going to. You don't know if they're going to, shut down and fail to pay winnings if you happen to be ahead or something like that. So, that's one thing I would always definitely be worried about if I were to get into the internet gambling. And internet gambling also may be vulnerable, or at least more vulnerable, to invasions of privacy. So basically, if you have someone or some company that is trying to influence a person to play, they might really be interested in paying for a list of people who are betting on, sports or something like that. So there's some ethical issues, potentially some privacy issues here, potentially as well. So with this, we've talked about some of those challenges, some of those dangers. I think it's important to realize that there are some things that you can do as well if you are starting to see some problems. So, if you are developing a problem or you think you're struggling a little bit with gambling, you can actually still request to be self-excluded from a site. So there's also software that can actually block gambling sites. It's called gamblock.com. So you can go there for more details. But that's, one tool that you could use as well to hopefully at least limit your problem or stop your problem altogether. And then as usual, that's pretty much it for today. I do have some resources here as well. So if you or someone is struggling with their gambling, you can always reach out to these resources and they would be very happy and interested to help. So I'll leave this up for a couple more seconds, but thank you everybody for tuning in today, and we'll see you next time with another Gambling Did You Know session.